All right, let's dive into a topic that affects millions of people: divorce in India. There's this quiet revolution happening in the courts, and it's completely changing the game for how marriages end. So let's break it all down. So let me ask you this, and be honest. Are you, or maybe someone you know, feeling stuck in a marriage that's just broken? For so long, the legal way out felt almost impossible. But that's all changing, and in a really big way. For decades, getting a divorce in India was, well, it was like this long, painful, uphill battle. But that's not the only story anymore. Landmark rulings have paved, totally new roads. So today, we're going to explore three very different paths to end a marriage. Think of it like this. There's the old, difficult route. Then there's a much faster, smoother highway. And finally, a brand new bridge built by the Supreme Court itself. Ready? Let's get into it. Okay, first up, we've got path number one, the fault route. This is the old guard, the traditional way, and honestly, it's the hardest road to take. This is where you literally have to prove it's the other person's fault the marriage is over. And wow, when you look at this, you can see just how tough this path really is. It's not enough to just say, hey, the marriage is broken. Nope. You have to prove one of these 7 specific faults. And get this, for something like adultery, the standard is beyond reasonable doubt. That's the same level of proof they use in a criminal trial. It's an insanely high bar, and that's exactly why this route can take forever, cost a fortune, and just drain you emotionally. But hey, even this old road is getting some updates, which is good news. Let's take cruelty, for instance. The courts have really widened its definition. It's not just about physical harm anymore. Now it can cover things like financial abuse, one spouse controlling all the money, or even emotional abuse, like a parent being blocked from seeing their kids. This is a really big deal because it shows the law is finally starting to catch up with the more subtle, but just as damaging, ways a marriage can fall apart. All right, let's move on to path number 2, because this is a total game changer, especially for couples who've already decided together that it's over. We're talking about the mutual consent route. And here it is, the single biggest update. Before 2023, every single couple filing for a mutual divorce got hit with this mandatory 6-month cooling off period. It didn't matter if you've been separated for 5 years, you still had to wait. It was just the rule. But now, that wait is no longer set in stone. The court can actually waive it. This is a huge, huge shift toward a much more compassionate and frankly common sense approach. So you might be wondering, how do I get on this fast track? Well, the court has a kind of checklist. First, you need to have been living apart for a good while, at least 18 months. Second, you have to show that you've tried to work things out, reconciliation, and it just didn't work. Third, and this is a big one, you have to have already figured out all the tough stuff: money, property, who the kids will live with. If you can check off all those boxes and both of you agree the marriage is truly over, you can ask the court to skip the waiting period and just let you move on with your lives. Okay, now for path number 3. And this is the most revolutionary of them all. This one didn't come from a new law passed by Parliament. Nope. It came directly from the Supreme Court, using its own special constitutional powers. This is what we're calling the irretrievable breakdown revolution. To really get how groundbreaking this is, you have to understand the legal traps so many couples were stuck in. Just imagine, a marriage is dead. Emotionally, physically, it's just over. But you can't prove one of those specific legal faults we looked at earlier. So what happens? You're trapped, stuck in a loveless marriage with no legal way out. That is the exact problem the Supreme Court decided to tackle. And their reasoning was just so clear and powerful, summed up in this one statement: forcing dead marriages to continue serves no purpose. It's just simple human logic, right? The court basically said the law shouldn't be a cage that traps people in relationships that are already over. And so, using its unique power under something called Article 142 of the Constitution, the Supreme Court created a brand new exit ramp: irretrievable breakdown. What does that mean? It means if a marriage is, and I'm quoting the court here, totally unworkable, emotionally dead, and beyond salvation, they can grant a divorce. It's finally acknowledging that, hey, sometimes a marriage is just over, even if you can't pin it on one of the old school faults. Now, hold on, this isn't some magic wand. The Supreme Court is really careful about when it uses this power. They're going to look for a few key things: a really long separation, think 6 years or more, proof that you've genuinely tried to reconcile and failed, and, this is absolutely crucial, a guarantee that the spouse who is financially dependent and any kids are taken care of. So this is really a tool for those exceptional cases, a last resort for marriages that are well and truly finished. And that last point, the one about financial support, that's so important, and it brings us to the practical reality that's a part of all three of these paths. A divorce isn't just about emotions, it's also very much about money. So how does the law make sure the more vulnerable person is protected while everything is going on? Let's talk about the financial safety net. Okay, there's this legal term, maintenance pendente light. I know it sounds super complicated, but the idea behind it is actually really simple. It's basically temporary financial support. If you're the spouse who earns less or maybe doesn't earn an income at all, you can ask the court to order your partner to help with your living expenses while the divorce case is still going on. It's designed to make sure nobody gets put into a terrible financial spot just because their marriage is ending. So what does that actually look like in terms of numbers? Well, every case is different, of course, but the courts often have a starting point, a sort of benchmark. And as you can see, that's usually somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 33% of the higher earning spouse's income. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a pretty good guideline that gives you a realistic idea of what to expect. All right, so let's just quickly recap the three massive changes we've talked about. First, if you and your partner agree to split, a mutual divorce can be way faster now that you can potentially skip that 6-month waiting period. Second, the Supreme Court has created a whole new way out for marriages that are emotionally dead, even if nobody is technically at fault. And third, the old rules are getting smarter, with the definition of cruelty now including things like financial and emotional control. Big stuff. All of these changes, they're a huge step forward, right? They focus on dignity and common sense when a relationship ends. And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. As our laws get so much better at handling the end of a marriage, what does that mean for how we should think about and legally structure the beginning of one?